So, My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 321 has officially released on the Shonen Jump app, and let me just say, Mineta is trending for some apparent reason, and I think in this video we're going to talk about it because it may have to deal with a translation issue when it comes to this chapter, and we'll get a little bit more into that right after this intro. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, here to talk to you about My Hero Academia, Manga Chapter 321, from Class A to One for All. And when it came to this chapter, in this video, what I want to talk about is the differences in the translations between the official and unofficial translations, because there are a few differences, not a whole lot, but there is one major difference that I really want to get into that kind of shifts the perspective of a certain character and how they felt when they were talking to Deku, as well as showing a little bit more explanation of the relationship either through the flashbacks or through the dialogue that certain characters say, and how that can be built on a little bit more, if not next chapter, in the next few chapters. So I'm ready to talk about it, but before we do that, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Manga Man Drew, if you like My Hero Academia content like spoilers, discussions, and reviews. So if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload. And with that out the way, let's get right into the discussion. So, we get the first difference in translations between the official and unofficial translations on the first page of the chapter, right after we see the confirmation of who was driving that black car, which was Endeavor, as well as we get hints of Hawks and Best Jeanist being in the area. The first difference comes from when the unofficial translation, when Endeavor is talking to the students and Hawks is talking to him, Hawks brings up that leaving all of this to Jeanist might lead to a faster resolution right after Endeavor tells the students about needing to make sure that civilians are safe, implying that Hawks doesn't believe that these student heroes can do the basic task of keeping the civilians safe. But in the official translations, it's a little bit different. But in the official translations, Hawks talks to Endeavor not about the civilians, but about Best Jeanist bringing in Hawks. And it has no relationship to the students making sure the civilians are safe. So that is a very distinct difference between the official and unofficial translations, because it shows that Endeavor has faith that the students will be able to convince Deku to come back to UA, and that there was no need for Best Jeanist to restrain him, because if Best Jeanist restrained Deku, then it doesn't guarantee that Deku would not try to escape from UA. But if the students are able to convince him, then there is a guaranteed chance that he will stay at UA, where they can come up with a better plan. And Endeavor's hunch was right, as we saw at the ending of this chapter, where Ida was the one to convince Deku to stay, as far as we're aware of at this moment. Now, going into the next difference between the official and unofficial translations, pretty much everything from that moment at the first chapter all up until the moment that Deku breaks out of the ice is very much the same, more or less, between the official and unofficial translations. Urashima is dreading that he wants to say a lot more to Deku. Shoto explains that what Deku is doing may not be the best idea, and he may be falling into All for One's plan. I will say that it makes more sense for what Shoto is saying in the official translations, and there is a little bit more clarity, because he talks about how One for All's plan may have been to wear Deku down, so it would have been best to stay at UA, while in the unofficial translation, he just brings up more of the idea that Deku's plan is not inherently correct, which is actually contradicted in the chapter later on. But pretty much all of that is the same between the official and unofficial translations. The only slight difference is what Deku hears, because in the unofficial translation, he brings up that All for One said, "You're next." But in the official translation, All for One says, "Your turn." So it's a little bit different, and it's just built upon preference. But for me, I think probably saying "you're next" is probably a more accurate understanding of what All for One was trying to say, but it keeps the consistency for how Viz translated My Hero Academia during the All Might fight with All For One, where he says your turn instead of your next in the official translation. So it's just a small detail showing consistency between the unofficial translation and the official translation. Next, there is a major difference between the official and unofficial translation, but it involves a particular character that I'm going to get into shortly. So I'm going to go over to the next difference in translation, comes with Uraka and what she's trying to say to Deku when she gets the pounce and the jump on him. So when it comes to the differences between the official and unofficial translations for what Uraka says, there is an actual difference between them, because in the unofficial translation, she brings up about how the situation is not the same anymore, and how and then she's cut off by Deku leaving, in reference to how she thinks that saving Deku now is different from saving Bakugo back then. She doesn't get to say what she wants in that scene. But that is different in the official translation, because she does pretty much say the same thing about how the situation is different in reference to wanting to save Bakugo and how that situation would be humiliating. But she's actually able to continue her statement in the official translation by saying that that situation with Bakugo is different, but she is also different. And I really like the official translation for this, because it ties into the change and the shift of Uraraka's goals of being a hero. Because at first, she wanted to be a hero to make her parents happy and to get a lot of money, but after her experiences of learning how to be a hero, that shifted to wanting to be a hero to save other heroes. So it just makes sense that the Uraraka in the past, who thought that saving Bakugo would be humiliating, would think differently now, because her goal and her mindset of being a hero has also changed. So I think this is a good moment of characterization and potential character development of Uraraka, showing how much she changed as a character, and you see that in the official translation, but not necessarily in the unofficial translation. And now we get to the second to last difference in translations between the official and unofficial translations. Pretty much everything else up from the moment with Uraraka towards the end of the story is relatively the same between both translations. The only quote-unquote major difference is Bakugo's new move, which in the unofficial translation is Explosive Speed Turbo Cluster, but in the official translation it's called Blasting Speed Turbo Cluster. So it's not really that much of a difference. Also, there is a slight difference between what Bakugo says in the official translation versus the unofficial translations in referencing to Ida, because in the official translations, he calls Ida Prez, but in the unofficial translation, he calls Ida President. And I would say Prez fits more with Bakugo's character in the story than straight up calling Ida President, because Bakugo has a tendency to call people not necessarily by their names, but by nicknames. Since Ida is the president of the class, it just makes sense for Bakugo to call him Prez. As well as there is a difference between what the second user of One For All says, but like I said, that has more to do with the consistency of the official and unofficial translations than it actually has to do with its meaning and how it's actually translated. So now that we've talked about most of the differences in translations, I want to go over the specific character dynamics that we saw in this chapter and go in a little bit more detail about how that relates to what we've seen in the manga prior and what it can mean going into the future. And I'm going to start off with someone that I already touched upon when it comes to what we saw in this chapter, and it's going to be Uraraka. So when it comes to Uraka, I want to bring up the difference that we see with her ideals when it comes to her wanting to rescue Deku and her wanting to rescue Bakugo. Because in chapter 85, that is where we saw her flashback, which we see in this recent chapter, about how she considered it disgraceful to be rescued, and that is the view that Bakugo would have. And what is very interesting about this is that this happens before they are considered licensed heroes, and before Uraraka was involved in the 8 Precepts arc, where she held Idai's body and was the last one to be there for him before he died, which was where we began to see the shift in her ideals of being a hero. So it's very interesting to see that in this moment, this is the moment that was picked, because it shows a drastic shift between Uraraka, showing how much she has developed and how much she has grown as a character. And I think what is very important with this is that this kind of cements the idea that we may not actually see Uraraka's love confession to Deku until later on in the story. But I think what this is entailing is that she may not be as secretive of her feelings towards Deku, and that she may be a little bit more open about it because of her shift in character. Because if you remember correctly, during the provisional license exam, that is where Uraka was at the moment where she was gonna suppress her feelings for Deku so that she can become a hero. And then when we get over to the joint training arc, we see that even though she's putting her feelings down, she still has the goal of being the hero to rescue other heroes, with the first hero, or the first person where those ideals began to manifest, was trying to rescue Deku. So it just makes sense that we would tie her ideals into this chapter, and how she's not just doing this just to be the hero to save other heroes, but also because she does have a love for Deku. So I think that most likely what this chapter may be setting up is the love confession towards the end of the series, and how she's going to combine her wanting to save other heroes, how she wants to combine her ideas of being a hero to save other heroes, and cement that goal by saving Deku, the hero that inspired her and the hero that she loves the most. So yeah, it's just very interesting to see that reference, and that was a specific reference for Uraka, because it's not going to be the one that a lot of people jump on at first glance, but it just fits the situation a whole lot better than any other thing. I know I did advocate for a love confession, but in actuality, I think I like this direction more moving forward into the story. And now let's go on to Ida, which something that I saw on a Twitter post or on a YouTube comment is that when this chapter was released, it was released on the 7th anniversary of My Hero Academia being published in Shonen Jump, that at the end of the chapter, it is a reference when Ida says the exact same line to Deku that Deku said to Ida in the Stain fight. That line and that fight in the manga is 6 years old. What is even more amazing is that it came out pretty much on the exact same day, because up until that moment in the past, My Hero Academia only had 52 chapters, which is a year. So the fact that Hirokoshi was able to tie that all in with Ida's character, as well as with this specific line of dialogue referencing that, and how that line was used on Ida, and Ida is now using it on Deku, and also the parallels to how during that time, both characters were not being themselves and were being, it shows just how much parallels there are in My Hero Academia over the years. It shows how great of a mangaka Hirokoshi is by making that reference be so specific in a situation that is so paralleling to past and present events. That's just amazing, and that blew my mind when I actually saw it myself. Yeah. With that in mind, I think this is something that Hirokoshi may have had planned for a long while. Even though Ida hasn't played a main or a big or a crucial role in the story recently, he has always been there, and he has always shown a growth in his ideals over time. Going from just wanting to be a hero just like his brother, just to be a hero, to his fight with Stain when he realized the importance of saving people. Then the provisional license exam, putting his own license and goals on the sidelines if it means helping his friends, seeing how he prioritizes rescuing people over defeating the enemy in the joint training arc, and having all of those small things build up into this moment for him being the one to rescue Deku, using the exact same lines that Deku said to him to rescue him from his hatred of Stain. Like I said, it's just a beautiful moment with very small, minute build-up moments to it that makes sense if you go back and look through it, showing that even though Ida didn't have this big major role, it shows that even the smallest things can make the biggest difference. As we've seen with Uraka, Ida, and the other characters in the last chapter, that the small things that they have done to Deku and Deku has done with them or for them can make a major difference in the story as well as the people that they are helping. And with that in mind, let's tie into the final difference in translations between the official and unofficial translations, as well as talk about the impact that a certain character has been made when it comes to his involvement with Deku, and that character is, drumroll please, Mineta! Oh boy, this is going to be a fun and very toxic part of this video, so you can skip it if you want, but I would like for you to stay here because I have a few thoughts. So, when it comes to the difference between the official and unofficial translations, when it comes to Mineta, it comes from the moment where Tsuyu uses Mineta to try and capture Deku when Deku tries to escape her attack. And from here, this is something that I predicted in my prediction video of what will go down when it comes to Mineta's interactions and his relationship with Deku. Now, when we see in the flashback of what Mineta is bringing up, that he's bringing up the moment where Deku led both him and Froppy not only rescue themselves from the villains, but also to stop the villains in their tracks during the USJ invasion arc. And how I said in that video about how that moment really changed Mineta's view of being a hero, which eventually led to him being able to defeat Midnight and him becoming less of a coward. I mean, he's still a coward, but he's just a lot less of it. That was all due to Deku's influence. So he pretty much says that in this chapter, in the unofficial translations, that he never thought that Deku's power was unique, but what made him admire him is that he's able to do all of this while he's sweating, while he's nervous, while he's trembling in fear, but yet is still able to achieve victory. But in the official translation, it's a little bit different. Mineta brings up the same situation. He brings up how he doesn't view Deku's power as being unique, and that what he looks in Deku for when it comes to Deku trembling, and how when he's faced in that harsh situation, he was still scared, but he was still able to move forward. That because of what Deku was in that situation, that's why Mineta fell for him, implying that that was the moment that Mineta fell in love with Deku. Now, this is the reason most likely why Twitter blew up, because from the official translation, it's implying that Mineta may be gay, or at the very least bisexual, or falls on the spectrum of the LGBTQ+ community. Now, the real question is, do I think that Mineta is gay? No. And this is where the hate comes in. And the reason why I say that is because throughout the entire story, we have seen Mineta just do horribly perverted stuff. He's always ogled women, he's always looked at them, he's always had perverted thoughts, and he has kind of assaulted women by touching their certain areas. But when it comes to how this is translated, I think it's probably more accurate to say that Mineta admires Deku and not loves him. The admiration makes more sense because it applies to more students. If what Mineta is saying about Deku is love, then that means that literally the entire class has a romantic relationship in one way or another with Deku. And I'm not saying that's impossible, I'm just thinking that it seems very unlikely, especially following Mineta's track record. So from my perspective, I think the official translation may have translated it better, and even though Shonen Jump and Viz are the more official translations of it, they can still make mistakes when it comes to translations because of how different American English and Japanese is. You can never really have a direct one-for-one translations because of different nuances between the two languages. Also, you know, Viz has made mistakes. I hate bringing this up, but Dynamite, yeah, they really dropped the ball on that one. But still, overall, when it comes to translations in this chapter and the characterizations of Mineta and the other characters, they are pretty spot on most of the time, if not more spot on. So it still didn't take away from my enjoyment of the chapter and my enjoyment of Mineta's character. It's just, I think a lot of people are blowing this out of proportion from both sides. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this chapter. Hopefully I do not get hate for this, but these are just my thoughts. This is just a discussion video. I still love My Hero Academia, and hopefully you enjoyed this video as well. And if you did, leave a like on this video to show that you like these type of discussions, as well as like how I structured this video. They would be very appreciative. And leave your comments down below on what do you think about Mineta and his sexuality. Do you think he's bisexual? Do you think he's gay? Or do you think that it just may be a difference in translations between English and Japanese? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. Leave a like on this video, like I said. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you like this type of content, and hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I upload more content like this. So yeah, do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye! Huh.